Yeah, so I did meet Dhardo, when was it? September 1981. I'd been invited out to India by Lokamitra. So in India that time, there were two order members there. Well, starting, Lokamitra started it, and he had another order member there called Purna. So he's a New Zealand order member, and he's now a public preceptor in New Zealand. So there was just three of us. And at that time, I think there was maybe 7 Indian order members in Pune, and there was 2 up in Ahmedabad. Purna used to go up to Ahmedabad to look after them. I went up there once. It was 47 degrees. We didn't go out during the day. We used to sit under a tap. Anyway, so I went on this trip, 3-month journey up to Kashmir, Srinagar, a bit of a problem place now, and then up to Leh in Ladakh. Then I went down Dharamsala, Patan, Lucknow, Calcutta, and then up to Darjeeling, because you applied for a visa for Kalimpong. You only get 3 days. You have to apply before you leave England. So I had to go to Darjeeling to find a visa, which I did find it. And so then I went up to Kalimpong. You have 3 days, but basically you got 1 day, because the first day you arrive, you get settled. The next day you've got your day, and then the third day you leave. Yeah. So I went to see Dhardo. I had a good talk through an interpreter. But I must admit, I mean, I was pretty wiped out after all that. So it's been pretty rough traveling in India. But it's amazing, after I left the place, after seeing him, I felt high as a kite. The first thing that struck me about him was somebody who didn't have an ego. That was the way I saw it. It's like there was a presence there, but it was a total presence. And you could tell when he was there, he gave you his full attention, right? You could tell he didn't have a wandering mind and that. I mean, that's the only way I could put it. He just was fully attentive, yeah, and very sharp, yeah, but very, very kindly sort of guy. It's funny, years later when I was in Tibet, I went to where his monastery was, and I kept saying to the monks, Dhardo Rimpoche, and one of them grabbed me and took me down to this basement, but full of these stupas, and he pointed at a stupa and said, Dhardo Rimpoche. So I photographed it and I sent it back to Dhardo, which he was quite pleased about. Because here you were in the previous life. But anyway, so his thing is the theme, cherish the Dharma. So we'll just kind of start with what's called the last words of the Buddha, as it were. It's from the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. I think usually translate it as the last days of the Buddha. Right. So some of the last words of the Buddha, he said, and the Lord said to Ananda, Ananda, it may be that you will think, the teacher's instruction has ceased. Now we have no teacher. You should not be seen like this, Ananda. For what I have taught and explained to you as Dhamma and discipline will, at my passing, be your teacher. Yeah? So we seem to have lost one of the 3 jewels. Yeah. But the Dharma jewel and the Buddha jewel are the same thing. Anyway, there's a lot you could say on that about the notion of, in Pali Canon, of Dharmakaya. The Buddha says to his disciples, you were born out of my lips, right? So it's because I am Dharmakaya. He's the embodiment of the Dharma. It's not like what happened later on. It means he embodies the Dharma. So to see the Dharma is to see him. And he actually, he does say that, actually. So in a sense, this is what we have to cherish, is in a sense, the Dharma. And that's what Dhardo says, cherish the Dharma. But to cherish it, we have to study it, learn it, investigate it, discuss it, and go over it again and again and again, right? And I remember when I went to Tuscany on the team in 1983, Bhante was staying at the LBC. I think Harsha Prabhu was staying there at the time as well.
Yeah.
But anyway, I said to Bhante, well, what are you going to study on this ordination retreat. He said, "Oh, doing the Noble Eightfold Path." And I said, "Oh, you did that last year." He said, "Oh, so we have nothing more to learn, Sagramati." He was very good at sort of tickling you and that sort of thing. So that, in a sense, that we haven't really lost the Buddha, because the Buddha is the embodiment of Dharma. As we have the Vakali Sutta, and Vakali said, "For a long time, Venerable Sir, I have wanted to come and see the Blessed One, but I haven't been fit enough to do so." And the Buddha says, "Enough, Vakali. Why do you want to see this foul body of mine? One who sees the Dharma sees me. One who sees me sees the Dharma. For in seeing the Dharma, Vakali, one sees me, and in seeing me, one sees the Dharma." And then this is taken a step further. In the Majjhima Nikaya, it says, "Now this has been said by the Blessed One. One who sees dependent arising sees the Dhamma. One who sees the Dhamma sees dependent arising." This is not the Buddha speaking, but Sariputta. But the Buddha was actually present at the time. So you have the whole essence of the Dharma is Pratitya Samutpada. You say everything that the Dharma has manifested is all something in dependence upon conditions. As Nagarjuna says, he says something like, anything that is independent of conditions does not exist. Yeah. So basically what we're saying is, and the Buddha says it in the Flower Sutta, I had that with Bhante just before he died, that all that exists is what is dependently arisen. There's nothing else. There's no absolute, there's no such thing as unconditioned or whatever. It just doesn't exist. All that exists is what arises in dependence on conditions. And if you fully see that, that's what awakening is. So all we know what happens on that is that somehow you don't come back to samsara. You don't know what happens. I think the Buddha was too smart for that, answering those questions, because whatever he said, it would be words that are created in samsara. And whatever he said, we probably, if you're not awakened, misunderstand it. So the best thing to do is he's given us the practice and to get on with it. Yeah. And he says that the Dharma is for the cessation of dukkha, nothing else. It's not for making you a wise man or anything like that. It's to put an end to dukkha. So in this sense, it all adds up to that. If one cherishes the Dhamma, one also has to cherish what is at the heart of the Dhamma, i.e. dependent arising. And whatever doctrines, practices we have, they're all expressions rooted in dependent arising. The Buddha's Dharma is all those conditions that help us along the path. Even the Dalai Lama said this. The Dalai Lama said the Pratitya Samutpada is the Buddha's mantra. It's like a mantra, yeah. But the Buddha does warn us. He says in the Arya Pariyasana Sutta, which is the Noble Sutta, he says that Dharma that I have attained is profound, hard to see and hard to understand, peaceful and sublime, unattainable by mere reasoning, subtle, to be experienced by the wise. But this generation delights in attachment, takes delight in attachment, rejoices in attachment. It is hard for such a generation to see this truth, namely specific conditionality, dependent origination. So this is the other side of it. Yeah, it's quite hard to understand. It's easy to understand intellectually, Pratitya Samutpada, this goes right to that, etc., etc. But the difficulty is in seeing the implications of that. Yeah, everything we do is an action that can have a consequence. Right? So that's why it's quite difficult to follow the Dharma and, just focus on skillful action all the time. Yeah. So it's a bit of what Nietzsche calls it. He says man is a war, and the war happens within. It's not a war with the outside world. If you're having a war with the outside world, you're having a war with yourself, really. Yeah, because you're the problem. Yeah. That's what he would say. So we go from the Buddha's final words to what just saying this is the Buddha's first words, and it's to do with Pratitya Samutpada. So for this we go into the Udanas, right? So the Udanas are in the Pali. You got the Udana, but the thing is, the Udanas are only the verse sections; they're not the prose sections, right? The prose section has been added much later, and often the prose sections have absolutely no relation to the verse. So the Udanas are the verse. So they have 8 chapters in the Udana, and each one has got 8 suttas. So you've got 80 Udanas. But the interesting thing is, I only found this out years ago, there's also a text called the Udana Varga, right, which is written in what's called Buddhist Sanskrit. And somebody did a translation in the late 1800s. We didn't know anything about this, right? And the thing is, there's a bhikkhu called Ananda Jyoti, and I just found he's got a website. He does translations and all that. But he's done a little booklet you could download as a PDF, and it's got all the Udanas in the Pali Udana, and the parallel Udanas to it from the Udana Varga, but it's written in hybrid Sanskrit. Yeah. So you have to understand, Pali is not a language. Yeah, the Buddha said that to his bhikkhus that they had to teach in the local Prakrit. So that's like local, what do you call it, dialect, right? So that's what they taught. But then when they were going to compile the canon together, you know, put it into writing, well, the Theravadins, I think they did the wrong one. Yeah, so what they had all these Prakrits, and they kind of fabricated something that they felt could cover them all. Yeah, and that's what Pali is. And that's a mistake as well, because Pali meant the text, yeah, not the commentary. So Pali Bhasa was the language of the text, the suttas. Yeah, but somebody made a mistake in the early 1800s and thought that Pali Bhasa meant the language of Pali, and it's stuck like that ever since. Yeah. Anyway, just a bit of scholarly stuff there. So the interesting thing is, like in a lot of what goes on in Buddhism now, is we were very reliant, for getting back to the Buddha, on what the Pali Canon had. Yeah, you did have fragments of Sanskrit texts and stuff like that, but in the last 10 years, see, the Theravada tradition maintained their tradition in Pali and the Buddhist suttas, but there's loads of other schools, right? And their version of the same Pali, of their canon, which is roughly the same, that was translated into Chinese. Yeah? And you have 4 agamas, and they correspond to the Majjhima Nikaya, Anguttara Nikaya, Samyutta Nikaya, and what's the 4th one? Can't remember. Digha Nikaya. Yeah. And so what they're doing now, people like Analayo, they look for parallels, right? So there's a sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya. So look in the Madhya Agama, that's the version that went into Chinese and has come back into English. So you put them together, yeah, and you just ignore things like place names and all that, but you look for doctrine in similes. And so where they are in agreement, you can see that is earlier, before the splits happened. So it's a bit earlier, right? But when we compare the first 3 Udanas in the Udana, our Udana, in the first 3 Udanas in Udana Varga, they are identical. Yeah. Well, there's one word different in it. It means understood or comprehended in the other one, that's all. So what this says is that both these are translations from some Prakrit source. Yeah, they're actually translations, both of them. One's in hybrid Sanskrit and one's in Pali. And where they agree, so word for word, as it were, they must exist. That must have been what the original text said. Yeah. So this is a very, very early text. It might be the earliest thing we've got, actually, that's been preserved. So I'll just read them out. So the first one says, when the nature of things becomes manifest to the ardent meditating Brahmana, then all his doubts vanish, since he knows the nature of a thing and its cause. The second one, just the same, roughly. And when the nature of things becomes manifest to the ardent meditating Brahmana, then all his doubts vanish, since the cessation of conditions has been understood. Then the third one says, when the nature of things has become manifest to the ardent meditating Brahmana, he dwells dispelling Mara's army, as the sun dwells lighting up the firmament. Right? So basically you've got Pratitya Samutpada. The Buddha sees the nature of how things come into being in dependence on conditions. And he sees how when the conditions disappear, things disappear, right? And so the result of that is the awakening. And the awakening is he dispels Mara's army. So dispelling Mara's army is just a kind of a metaphor, I suppose, for destroying all the conditions, etc., that create samsara. There's nothing left in the Buddha that could possibly cause him to come back in samsara. So that's Mara's army. Mara's army is like all the fear, but also the really lovely desires we all have and all that. Yeah. So the Buddha disperses it. And the result of that is he dwells like the sun, lighting up the firmament. So it's interesting when you talk about the Buddha's awakening, they don't put it in concepts. Yeah. When you go into these areas, they usually use metaphors or similes and things like that. So the Udana Varga is roughly the same, except that the last verse, he dispels Mara's army and the sun dwells lighting up the firmament. They're split over 2 verses. That's the only difference. Yeah. So just to look at the words here. So when the nature of things, the nature of is not actually in the text. With verse stuff, you usually put things, if you see it in square brackets, they have to add things to make them be understood, right? So when the nature of things, that's dhammas, becomes manifest to the ardent meditating brahmana, right? So if you think of the Buddhist, so ardent as a, where have I got my Pali stuff? Wait. So what's the word? Oh no, I haven't got the right one. Never mind. So ardent is the word, the tapasan. It means like to generate heat. It's connected with the word for asceticism, right? So a lot of the other Indians, the ones who'd renounced and living in the forest, their idea was if you torture the body and you burn all the bad karma off, that will liberate you. The Jains saw this, right? And so the other one is the meditating brahmana. So when the Buddha went forth, and this is interesting, the text, 5 of them tell you when the Buddha went forth, where mother and father wept with tearful faces, mother and father. Yet the other traditions say the Buddha's mother has to die within a week. So that's just nonsense, really. Yeah. The text tells you the Buddha's mother. And also when the Buddha leaves home, he's got no son, he's got no wife. Yeah. So these are things that, this is what scholarship I like about it. It shows you how things are added like this. That was to make the Buddha respectable to India. He'd done his caste duty, he'd created a son. Because in the Vedic tradition, if you haven't got a son, you can't get to the Devaloka or the whatever other loka. You can't get to heaven. You have to have a son who does the rites. So the Buddha did his right thing, he got married. So this is how the Brahminical tradition works. Right? Yeah. In your old age, you and your wife can go into the forests. Then when you've done everything, you brought up a son, family, or whatever, then you can go into the forest. You can go alone, or you can go as a pair or a pair. So, so what did the Buddha do? What was the Buddha's life after he went forth? So he went forth, and the Arya Pariyasana Sutta says he went to see Alara Kalama, right? And you learn from Ara Kalama what we recognize as something like meditation as far as some of the Arupa Dhyanas, the very high states. And as far as Ara Kalama was concerned, this was awakening. This was the final one. But the Buddha wasn't satisfied. So he went to see Uddaka, the son of Uddaka Ramaputta, yeah, son of Rama. And he went to a few further stages with him. Yeah. And then Uddaka Ramaputta says, no, I've got it mixed up, never mind. He says, well, you're my equal, so we can share the leadership. And the Buddha says, he wasn't satisfied. Yeah, the Buddha wanted to go on. He felt unsatisfied with what he had. So then he went to the other tradition, the ardent bit. Yeah. So he practiced as an ascetic and apparently nearly killed himself. You know, he said that if he pressed in his stomach, he'd feel his spine in the back and things like this. So in a sense, Because the way this works, the second line, the ardent meditating the Brahma, is cause, and the first line is the effect. Yeah, Sanskrit sort of works, it probably works like that. So what the effect of that is, the nature of things becomes manifest. Right? Now this is sort of manifest. The word is so it's something that appears. Yeah, and the Buddha says, well, in other words, it's something unheard of before. So this is the Buddha's awakening. Yeah, but the Buddha's awakening couldn't have come about, but without the conditions under which he went under those Alara Kalama and Udakaramaputa and all the ascetic stuff. So the Buddha completely exhausted everything India had to offer. Any teacher, any other person had to offer him. He'd exhausted it completely. Yeah. So the second one as well, that's that. So the Buddha gives that up. Yeah. Then he goes under the, well, it wasn't called the Bodhi tree then because he hadn't got Bodhi yet, but he went under the tree in the forest near, where was it? Bodh Gaya. Right. So I think it's, I mean, this is me, like, but I think, so when he sat down under the Bodhi tree, he'd exhausted everything had to offer. So he was at a loss, you could say. He was stymied. Yeah, a loss. So another thing I find out is, and this we're going to talk about rather than read out. So there's a sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya where the Buddha, you go through all the meditation stages, right up to neither perception nor non-perception. Yeah, that's the pinnacle that one can go in samsara. But the Buddha says, and the Buddha calls that Upadana Seta. So that means it's the highest and chief of all clinging. Yeah, because Upadana, you remember that's in the 12 Madonnas, the worldly ones. The Upadana goes all the way through all the meditation things right to the very pinnacle of samsara, the same as what we call thirst. Right? So you could say that's where the Buddha was. That's as far as he got, you could say. But he wasn't satisfied. So he's sitting under the tree having got all that and having done all that work over the years. Right? And so this is what I think the clue is. When it becomes manifest, it was something new that arose in the Buddha. You could say, it's interesting that Upadana, defined as Upadana, the Buddha says, you will only gain insight when you release that clinging. So it's incredibly refined clinging, yeah, incredibly refined, the most refined clinging you can have, or attachment. So the Buddha said, so if the Buddha sort of sees that, yeah, and he lets go of that clinging, well, what's left is awakening. Yeah. And I think it's important to understand that awakening, it arises in dependence on conditions. Yeah. So when the Buddha is telling you anything like when the nature of things become manifest, that's him trying to express, I think, what actually happened to him under the Bodhi tree. Yeah, it's like there's a word I got when I was at university in philosophy of science. It's called the Theory of Emergence, and Buddhism kind of needs it, right? Because the Theory of Emergence says that things come into being that never ever existed before. Right? So it's obvious that once upon a time there were no human beings, no animals, no trees, no grass, no rocks, no river, no fish. So how did it all come about? We don't know. Yeah, we don't know. Science can tell you sort of through theories like evolution, can tell you sort of how it probably come about, because that's after the event. You go back, but it can't tell you why. And it's the same with awakening. The Buddha teaches Samutpada doesn't tell the Buddha why he became enlightened, only that he was. Yeah, but he had his whole life to reflect on and figure out basically, well, what were the conditions under which this arose? But you can only do that after. And so when he gives us the Dharma, what he's given is how he saw the conditions for awakening to arise. Yeah, basically ethics, meditation, and wisdom. Yeah. So I think that's what these three verses are saying. Yeah. Because you do get a sutta that says what got the Buddha going into awakening was remembering his father was working, and he entered into the jhanas or something like that, and he said, "Oh, this way may be the way to enlightenment," but they probably didn't have the notion of enlightenment. Yeah. So I think that's as somebody not really being trying to understand how it happened. I don't think there's any way to understand how awakening happened. Yeah. We know it happens and depends on conditions, but that's it, right? And so just like once upon a time there were no human beings or no animals, once upon a time there was no Buddhas. Yeah, but there's like having human beings come out, a different order of being arose, right? Who that's about maybe one of the ways you could see it is that Buddha's a different order of being. He has absolutely no attachment. He doesn't depend on anything. He has no dependencies. Yeah? And all he does is, the only thing that's left, and it's a condition arising, is a compassion. The Buddha looked around the world, didn't he? And says, well, what's the point of teaching these people? Look at them. You know, they're just gross and petty things. And then he thought, well, what about some of the shamans? They've gone forth, so they might listen. So he went and saw the 5 ascetics who left him. Yeah, and started it off. So I think that's important to. It's the way, well, it fits in with cherishing it. So, you know, when you think about that, it's the fact that that happened, and the Buddha's given us the Dharma to help us to try to get along in that sense. Yeah, that's why we should cherish it, because it's the most worthy thing that you can have in a way. Yeah, it's very, very worthy. So, what else is there? There's another thing that fits into Pratītya. It's kind of the mystery of it, right? So there's a penetrative sutta. I'll read it out. Bhikkhus, I will teach you a penetrative exposition of the Dhamma. Listen and attend closely, I will speak. And it goes on to say, and what is the result of dukkha? What is the vipaka of dukkha, the consequence of dukkha? And this is interesting. He says, here's someone overcome by dukkha, with a mind obsessed by it, sorrows, languishes, and laments. He weeps, beating his breast, and becomes confused. Or else, overcome by dukkha, with a mind obsessed by it, he embarks upon a search outside, saying, who knows 1 or 2 words for putting an end to dukkha? Dukkha, I say, results in either confusion or in a search. And this is called the results of dukkha. So if we look at the, what did we call it? The spiral path thing and all that. I mean, the sutta is called the Upanishad Sutta, right? And so you got the samsaric ones beginning with ignorance, samskaras, consciousness, etc. Right? But then it joins on to what we call the transcendental path. But when people talk about 24 Madonnas, there's only 23, because the final 12th Madonna in the samsaric one is old stage, disease, and death. So that's not there. That's replaced by dukkha. And then after dukkha, you have faith or whatever, joy and all that comes after it. Yeah. So dukkha is kind of, here it's a pivotal thing. You need dukkha to start the spiritual life. The Buddha left home and sought an answer to dukkha. That's why he left home. Right? So you need dukkha to put an end to dukkha. If you're happy and content, you're going to be happy and content with what you got. So you need dukkha to get us off our asses in a way, you know, to put it bluntly. Yeah. So that's what the Buddha did. But the thing is, this is the mystery of Pratītya. It's totally undetermined if you have dukkha, that what will arise. Yeah. So it's a bit like once upon a time, we had no interest in Buddhism. Yeah, you probably heard about it, maybe saw a Buddhist statue, you had no interest. And then one day, for some unknown reason, you have an interest. You see a meditation poster or whatever, and you know you go on a search, just like the Buddha. Yeah, but you can't understand why that happens. You can't see a link. Now, the Buddha tells us it depends on conditions, so you can only think that, well, I don't know why these things occur to me. It's like, well, like a scientist, like say Einstein, he discovered the theory of relativity. He was the first man to think it. You know, it doesn't awaken anybody, but again, even in science, discoveries are made like this by people working hard and doing experiments. And then in one of those people, maybe something arises and they see it. So that usually what comes out of it doesn't really help mankind. This makes us lazy and things like that. So the word for this is Upanisa. This is the key word that changes everything with conditionality, right? Because it's very technical. I'd have to go into grammar and things, but in the older way, you say, with this as condition, that arises, right? But the word condition, pachaya, is replaced by upanisa, which means to sit near, yeah? So it's a bit like the way this guy who goes into it, Bhikkhu Nyanananda, he's dead now, but he's a brilliant sort of Dharma practitioner and writer. And he said he couldn't understand why nobody's understood this. Nobody's ever said what difference does this make? So basically, it takes away from a kind of deterministic view of Pratitya Samutpada, independence of this arises that and that, blah blah blah. But this shows you it's not really like that, right? You need dukkha to go on a search, yeah. And when you've got dukkha, you go on a search. Say you have you find confidence. That's how I translate sada, confidence. It gives you a confidence, right? So what it's saying is, for that stage to arise, dukkha is a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient condition. Yeah. And when it arises, it says, well, you probably don't even see what did it. Yeah. But that's what the thing says. So the Pratitya Samutpada, he says, he would say, in association with dukkha, sada comes to be. So it's in association with it. It's not because of it. Yeah. So there's a kind of different sort of relationship about how things arise. Yeah. So with the 12 Madonnas, the worldly one, it's a bit deterministic, you know. If you're born, you will die. There's no escape. Yeah. If you're ignorant, you will suffer. You'll just get confused and annoy yourself and other people. Yeah. So, but the interesting thing with those, the 12 Madonnas, is the contact, Vedana, feeling or sensation, Tanha, thirst, and Upadana. Yeah. That is where we work, right? That is where we live. And in a sense, that's where Bhante put the spiral, comes out of that. He says it comes out of thirst, but I don't think you can say that because they're not separate. We've separated them as concepts, but they're not separate. They're a continuity. Yeah. So that's where Bhante put it. In the 12 worldly Nidanas, the break happens in that space because that's where we are. That's where we live. Yeah. We have experiences. We respond to them. And then we want them or reject them, we cling to them or get rid of them. Yeah. And we cling because Upadana is clinging. So one of the other words for the goal in Buddhism, I think, is like the person who has no dependencies. Yeah. So one of the very early Pratitya Samutpada formulations, the question is, where does hatred, dispute, lamentation, jealousy, aversion, what is their source, their nidana? And the Buddha says, what is dear? Right? What is dear? What is dear is what gives you the sense of who you are. You know, your parents, your country, your friends, all the, you know, your football team. I mean, we build up a sense of ourselves from all the things we've, you know, taken in life, how we see ourselves. Yeah. So what we have to sort of get something else to cherish, because this is cherishing. What we cherish is really the things usually that are not going to help us towards Nibbana. So we have to cherish the Dharma. Yeah. So we cherish the Dharma, and we've got something that is to compete with the normal things of the world, computers and cars and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So that's where we have to move on. So the trouble is with the Pali Canon and Buddhism on the whole, Well, you have the dear is the problem, but also if the Dharma is dear to you, that's the answer. Yeah, it's a bit like you have to go to the Greeks to make sense of this. The Greeks were a bit more intelligent, I think. So you go to Socrates in the symposium. And the symposium's a drinking party, and they've all got to give a eulogy for Eros. So Eros is love. Right? So Socrates comes to do his, and he gets a mystical, right? Yeah? He talks about this priestess who educated him called Diotima. And Diotima says, there's no such thing as Eros love. Yeah? It's a generic term. It depends on what the object is. So you could have love for bodies, money, power, vengeance. But you could have a love of poetry, classical music, beauty, art. And you can see a love of the Dharma, cherishing the Dharma. Yeah. So there's nothing. It's like words only have a meaning in a context. So there's no bad words, in a sense, hardly, because what is dear could be not good for you. You get stuck somewhere and you can't let go, or if the object is the Dharma in your spiritual life and your spiritual friends are dear to you, that's fine, because that's skillful. One is unskillful and one is skillful. So even like thirst can be skillful or unskillful. This is what the Netipakarna says. Thirst can either drag you into samsara or could help you get released. Buddha Gosha talks about it as you're like a thirsty cow. So a thirsty cow, it's like what we do is we drink hot, boiling water. Yeah. But if you give the cow cold water, it slakes its thirst. So that's what the Dharma does to us. We need to thirst in a way, but what we have to find is something that slakes our thirst. So the Theravadins, when they talk about the destruction of thirst, it's not the destruction, it's the fading away. That's what the word means, fading away. Ceases. It doesn't mean to destroy. Thirst is satisfied. It's slaked, so it stops. When you're down your thirst and you get a glass of water, at least temporarily, your thirst stops. But it's just like with the Dharma, your thirst stops forever because you've got something worthwhile. So that's about it. I've rambled a bit, but that's what I like doing, I'm afraid. So any questions? Basically, we just talked mainly about the important points is the cherishing the Dharma. The Dharma is essentially Paticca Samuppada. And this notion of that dukkha can give rise to search or give rise to delusion. Yeah. And there's this kind of Paticca Samuppada can be like that. Yeah. The only thing that's guaranteed is to work is have we have our effort. Yeah.
Sagramati, I was just wondering if you could explain the way the Buddha worked with people, how the Buddha was when he met people. You talked about it the other day in study, like he was it something like he met their needs but not their wants, something like that. I'm being obtuse. He did.
Well, the Buddha's sort of life was it's called anukampa. We call it compassion. It's interesting when the Buddha and the Arahants have compassion. It's anukampa. What we try to develop with the Brahma Viharas is karuna. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the difference is, but seems to be different. Well, the Buddha just exists to help people. The Buddha fulfills his nature through helping people. And it's interesting, there's a sutta called the Hiri Sutta, right? It's about Hiri the horse trainer, and the Buddha's having a chat with Hiri the horse trainer. And he said, well, how do you go about training your horses? And the Buddha, Hiri said, well, some we be encouraged them and kind to them and love them and, encourage, but sometimes they won't respond. So we have to be a bit harsh sometimes, a bit rough, And so the Buddha says, well, what do you do with the horses that can't be trained? He said, we kill them. Because we can't have a horse coming from our school, who couldn't be trained. That would be bad on us. So the Buddha said, oh, this is interesting. This is what I do with my disciples. So here he says, Lord, I mean, you don't kill your disciples. He said, no. He said, but I treat my disciples, I encourage them and all that sort of thing and try to help them and give them everything I can. But sometimes if they don't listen, so I could be quite strong with them. Yeah, really quite strong with them and give them a bollocking. So, yeah. And so here he said, but what about the ones who don't pay attention? He said, well, I just leave them. Yeah, just miss them. It's no of his back. He's only there to help. You don't want help, right? But you see in the Mahayana, yeah, even in the early Mahayana Sutra, the Ugrapari Pritya, it's the Bodhisattva. He should be like the doctor, and his pupils would be like his patients. And if his patients get ill, it's his problem. It's his fault. And I just think that's stupid. Yeah. Well, it's like the great Bodhisattva takes on the dukkha of a world system. Yeah. And Alio's got an article on this. He isn't critical of it, but he just says how compassion became dukkha. Yeah. So the Buddha's compassion is the Buddha apparently. Gunyali has gone into in modern psychological terms of like the Buddha doesn't have empathy, things like that. Yeah, because he can't suffer. He's beyond being touched by things like that. Yeah, he doesn't have any needs or wants. Yeah, so he can't, you know. So all the Buddha wants is to help, and he'll do what he can to teach you. But if you're not interested, he goes like that time when Sariputra and Nodgulyan, they brought all these young monks, and they're all being unmindful and talking. The Buddha he just went off into the forest, sat there and meditated. So after a while, they come to get him, and he said, "Look, they're only young monks, Lord. You know, they're young. They need you." So he said, "Okay, quiet them down, and I'll come." Yeah. So if he's not going to be listened to, he just wants to be on his own because that's the most pleasurable state he's got, rather than being bickered by unmindful people like us.
Thank you.
I really think that's what we need to do with the Pali Canon. It's about 5,000 pages. I wish I was young again, because what it needs is to maybe 10 people who are into study to go through the whole of the Canon and just pick out the good suttas and cut out all the repetitions, etc. And you could probably put the whole into a little book. Yeah, like that Penetrative Sutta. The only thing really interesting in it is that, you know, it's about 5-6 pages, but that's the thing that stands out, and you think that's what you want to hear. This is teaching. This is something new, you know.
Sagramati, did you say that there was no such thing as unconditioned? This was early on when you were talking.
Yes. I've had this up with Bhante.
Okay, so I've recently been looking at, in the Dhammapada, the Song of Victory, and in there it's got a word, going to the Pali, Visankara Gatang.
Sankara what?
Visankara Gatam. So I've got that as non-conditionedness. He's gone to the non-conditioned.
Well, I mean, I think we have to abolish the word conditioned.
Right.
Yeah? Samskara is it's something that is creating. Yeah.
Mm.
And what's creating is karma. Yeah. So Samskrita, which is a Sanskrit for the unconditioned, means free from the results of karma. That's all it means. You're permanently free from karmic consequences, i.e., that's what a Buddha is. But there's no such thing as an unconditioned. The trouble with, like in Pali and Sanskrit, you have no the or a. There's no definite or indefinite article. So immediately we see the unconditioned, we turn it into something.
Mm.
Yeah. And how Pali works, so it's unconditioned. So a word ending in ed is what you call a past participle. So when you see that kind of grammatical term in a sentence, you look for the agent in the instrumental. Yeah. So like in India, they'd say the time was gone to by the Buddha. That's the sort of way they'd construct it. So the time was gone to, and you think, why? So you see the word unconditioned, you say, by what? Yeah. But we've looked at it as a noun. And I went out with Bhante, and he had to agree. I said, look, Bhante, what you say in the survey and all that, the Buddha never taught any such thing. But then he said something important as well. He said, after a couple of weeks, about a week, he rang up and said, well, we'll have to go through this again. He said, because we need a transcendental object. Yeah. So, because we've got to have something that gives us a sense of something very different and higher than us. Yeah. And you said you need that kind of sense, yeah, to really lead a full spiritual life. So the trouble with intellectual stuff is you can dismiss it a bit, you know. But that's what the words mean, yeah. Sankhara is created by, created with. That's what it sort of means. Sama is with, and kara is action, acting. So it's kind of, this is the thing about, I mean, I did Sanskrit for a year, but I was pretty rubbish about it. You learn a bit. So when you ever see a word with K-A-R written, it's something to do with karma, what we call karma. It's from a root, meaning karma.
Okay.
Yeah. So that, like the Karaniya Metta Sutta, the Karaniya. So Karaniya is the grammatical form. It's a kind of a passive future participle. So to be done, that's what the word means. The Karaniya Metta Sutta is, metta is to be done. Yeah, that's what it actually means. Because kara again is doing. So this has to be done, but it's a future thing. But it has to be done.
Thank you.
And the same with, if you look in the Samyutta Nikaya, yeah, there's a whole Samyutta, as they call it, a whole collection on the Asankata, yeah, what we call the unconditioned. Everybody calls the unconditioned, yeah. And that's where you find these things, but like the Buddha says, bhikkhus, what is the unconditioned? And he says, the cessation of great hidden delusion. And it goes on for 49 suttas, says exactly the same thing. Because after that follows, well, how do we get there? So the Buddha gives different things like mindfulness and clear comprehension, practice in the precepts, etc. But then the suttas go on and replace unconditioned with what it turns out there's about 33 epithets of the goal. So we should talk about the goal, not nirvana or unconditioned or whatever, yeah, because they're epithets of the goal. Yeah, and the nirvana was sort of it's what you call a cultural accident, yeah, because the extinction. I mean, this is what the Brahmins worship the eternal fire, and the Buddha says, no, you have to extinguish the fire of great hidden delusion. So when the Buddha said that to all these Brahmins, it was a big thing. It doesn't mean anything to us. Yeah. So the extinction of fire was quite something essential to the religion, anyway. So we have all these epithets with the goal, and it's interesting that all the positive ones, they're epithets. Yeah, the ones that are more literal are usually in the negative. Yeah, but you have the wonderful, the amazing, and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, and they're all just equally names for the goal. But we get stuck. The Theravadas of Bhagavad, they get stuck. The thing Praticca is the 12 Madonnas. Where in my research, I think the 12 Madonnas were not even taught by the Buddha. Mainly because you've got Vijnana in there. And the Buddha says in the, the cessation of Tana Sutta, the great cessation of Tana, he says, what is it now? Oh, I forgot what it was now. Oh, sorry, I forgot it. I had my laptop, I can do it. So what was the connection? What was the condition I was saying?
You were saying the epithets.
Yeah. No, I've lost it, I'm afraid. Lost it. Old age is creeping up.
You talk about the 12 Madonnas.
Oh, that's right. Yes, that's right. It's to do with the bhikkhu sati. That's why I want to talk about it. So there was this bhikkhu called Sati. Not Sati in mindfulness. It's Sati with a long A. Yeah. And Sati sort of says to the other bhikkhus that the Buddha taught that it's the same consciousness, vijnana, that goes from life to life. And so the Buddha didn't, they said the Buddha doesn't teach it. So they go to the Buddha with him, and he repeats it to the Buddha. And they say, "You stupid man, I never taught such a thing." Sorry. So what the Buddha says, he gives an analogy about consciousness. About consciousness like fire. Yeah, you don't have fire. You have a tree fire, a bush fire, an oil fire, a wood fire. Yeah. So the fire is always a different kind of fire, depending on what conditions give rise to it. And it's the same with consciousness. You have eye consciousness, nose consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness. There isn't any consciousness on its own. Yeah. So where that come in is when the Buddha never sensed in any kind of way that you went from life to life. Yeah. There was no mechanism for that to happen. The Buddha didn't give any. But the Theravadins did invent one. So it's called the, what's it called? Pati Sandhi Vijnana, or Pati. So the relinking consciousness that links past life with this life. So in the Madonnas, the third Madonna is Vijnana, consciousness. So they think that is the relinking consciousness, because the other two Madonnas are the previous life. You're ignorant and you created sanskaras, and the sanskaras come to this life, and then somehow or other consciousness carries them. But that's just, the Buddha didn't teach it. It's an Abhidharma text. Yeah. So the Buddha just left it. But you can imagine what happens. I mean, all the other schools had a soul or an Atman. Yeah. So that's what goes from life to life. So you can imagine clever Brahmins and all that saying, well, look, you teach rebirth. So how can you have rebirth if there's nothing to be reborn? Yeah. So they had to come up with a kind of solution. Yeah. They had to come up with a kind of solution. And so that was because they needed to support the monasteries. So the trouble is, it's like, same happened with the Mahayana. They have a problem, like the Sarvastivadins taught that the Dharmas have their own nature. Yeah, but rather than going back to the Pali Sutras or whatever their sutras were, you know, and to find out the answer, they actually go to another level. Yeah, they bring in something new, like emptiness. Yeah. But the Buddha says again and again, the Nagarjuna says again and again, emptiness of Pratīti Samudpada. Emptiness means things are empty of inherent existence, and the reason they're empty of inherent existence is because they're conditioned arisen. And Nagarjuna says himself, they're one and the same truth. But what did the Mahayana make of Shunyata? Becomes something, that wasn't what Nagarjuna taught. No, you have the 20 kinds of Shunyata and this sort of thing. Or with the condition, you have the condition is empty of the unconditioned is empty of the conditioned. No, I mean, when you look at that through Pratīti Samudpada, it just doesn't work. It's, you've got the wrong stick. Sorry, the wrong end of the stick. But I think it's the wrong stick, actually. Yeah.
Sagramati, we are close on the end of the evening, and I just would, yeah, I don't know if there's one more question that we could take, or you could take, sorry.
I'll have to take you all night.
Yeah, well, I feel quite alive as well. So is there another question, comment?
So what I would like to know, because I usually just do seminars, and it's usually with order members, and you know. So did you understand what I was getting at? That's what I want to know. Because I don't do classes at the centre or anything like that. So this is my world, as it were.
Should we show it with that?
Sorry?
We could show you like that, you know.
Oh.
Okay?
Okay, yeah, okay.
Say something?
Jolly good.
So I've made a lot of notes.
Yeah?
Because it's absolutely fascinating, but I'm not sure I'm going to understand them. So, yeah.
Well, just send me an email. Yeah, I'm quite happy to get people don't understand. I'm quite happy to do an email. Yeah.
It's absolutely fascinating what you've been saying, and
Right.
I think we've got a recording of it, haven't we, Bernie Vamser?
Yes, we have.
Yeah. So,
I hope we have anyway.
well, it's flashing recording, so it'd be good to really hear it all again. And yeah, it was incredible. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
What makes life worthwhile when you say that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's very good.
Well, I mean, I live in the community here. I've been here 7 years. I don't think the word Dharma has ever been mentioned. I'm not joking.
Yeah.
They're all right. But, I mean,
Well, you say, you know, it's sort of made things worthwhile, Sagramati. I think, you know, what I've picked up, it just shows, you know, how much you find the Dharma so worthwhile, and to put that, you know, to put over what you've, you know, you know, to give us a talk tonight that's so full and rich. I just, it's almost been invaluable. So this recording, I hope, will be, you know, watched and listened to and reflected on and acted upon, you know. Yeah, so I hope I'm speaking for others. You have delivered us something of real worth, and help sort of not, you know, take away some of the superfluous elements that have been added to the Dharma which we engage with.
but I've been a bit lucky as well, because I spent a lot of time in Band, even when I was at Majjhimaloka, when Paramartha couldn't put his eye drops in, I was the one who put his eye drops in. So you go around there at 9:30 on the dot. If you're a minute late, the phone is ringing, and you get a chat till 10. You know, just little things like, because I'm going to mention the Garva Sutta. So the Garva Sutta, I did this in Ipswich years ago, actually. I remember very clearly. Anyway, so the Buddha's awakened, and he looks around the cosmos and says, who can I honor and revere? You know, how did all this come about? You know, he didn't know. He's got something happened to him. He didn't know what. You know, so he's looking for somebody to tell me what's happened. And then he realized that there's nobody who's his equal. So what does he say? He reveres the Dharma. Yeah. So in Bhante's book on what is the Dharma, what Bhante said was something like, but what the Buddha reveres is the positive nidanas that go on after, that go on the horizon. So the Upanishad Sutta, the spiral path goes, and it stops at that bit. That's the Buddha sort of, because you have to be a Buddha, you go on another path, as it were, other nidanas. So I said to him, I said, well, do you still believe that? I said, no, not really. And he said something I thought was very good. He said, what's it he said? He said, what the Buddha revered was that aspect of the cosmos that makes Buddhahood possible. Yeah. So the cosmos is still conditionally arisen. And there's something in that, in the cosmos, as it were, that somehow, because he created the conditions, the cosmos intervened, as it were, and become awakened. You know, and I think it's like that because that's something to contemplate. Yeah, that the world we live in, because the saying in Buddha, and there's a lot of positive Nidana sequences in the Anguttara Nikaya. And one of the ways they say it happens esa dhammata, in accordance with the Dharma. Yeah. Because, well, people just translate it as nature. But I think it misses the point, because what we mean by nature is not what the Buddha means or what the Dhammata means. Yeah. So it just says it is not, you know, some state arises depending on that. How does it happen? It just naturally arises. It's just the course of nature. So there's nothing else doing. There's no somebody pulling twigs up there or pressing buttons. Yeah. So the cosmos that the Buddha saw was the cosmos that was what made what he did possible, because he did all the work, but the nature of existence, it has its own nature, and something new happens, something new come into being. So it's quite good to think on that, I think. Yeah. And the other one I think is important as well. It's in the what is it? The Joel Ornament of Liberation seminar. Yeah, it was done by the women, and it's what is it? It's in the first section called the motive, right? And Bhante says, isn't it really interesting that we can become dissatisfied with samsara? He said, it's as if something in us knows. But he said, but don't go there. If you go there and think that you will end up with Michaditis. Yeah? So he just said, you just recognize that this thing happened, but don't try and figure it out. Just recognize that it did happen. Because you're an unawakened being, you know, and you've got a lot of ideas, and if you put those ideas to that, you'll just go on the wrong track. The fact is, we can't, this is the thing, the mystery. Things are always on conditions, and we can't know why. Yeah? I mean, scientists' breakthrough, and I did, what was it, philosophy of science is bed, bath, and bus. Yeah? So there was that thing, I think it was a benzine ring. So this scientist, whatever, maybe he's in a team, he's working on this problem. Yeah, and he just can't get it. So he's stepping on a bus and he sees that Ouroboros symbol, the snake biting its tail. And that was an image that struck for him. He just saw what he was after. Yeah, don't know why. So that's how breakthroughs happen. Yeah, an image appears, but you don't know why. But in science, he could go away and do the maths, etc., and figure out a way it works, which will probably be superseded later on.
Mm.
So I think there's, I haven't been in a lot of seminars about Bhante talked to him. There's a lot of things I got from Bhante that he never said in his talks. In fact, he said maybe the opposite, because the talks were given 30 years earlier. Yeah.
Mm.
Another one is non-duality. I went to see him because a few things I wasn't happy with in some of the things he's written. What was it? I said, there's non-duality. I said, well, Bhante, there's no such thing. Yeah, no such thing. Usually in the text, it's called graha and grahaka, the grasper and the grasped. And people actually have seen, because I've looked at the Sanskrit, and they translate it as subject and object. So what it means, it's not non-duality. If you cease grasping at something, the whole changes on your side. You see it for what it is. But what you grasped at when you see it for what it is still there. It doesn't go away.
Mm.
Yeah. So it's the Yogacara talk about a revolution in the basis of the psyche. Yeah. And the Zen people say, what is it? In the beginning, mountains are mountains, trees are trees. Then you start on the path and you're not sure what they are. But once you're awakened, mountains and mountains are trees and trees. Yeah? So it's quite interesting that, I think. Yeah. So this get away from non-duality, it just buses all the way. Yeah. So like, I used to be very vulgar with Ratnaguna because he was into all this. I'm going to say something, you might not like it, but I'm a crude Dundonian at heart. Yeah. So I said, well, if there's no duality, what happens when the Buddha wipes his ass? Is everybody's ass wiped? If there's no duality, it doesn't matter whose ass you wipe. You know, so sometimes you have to be crude just to get the message across. You know? Yeah. And the Buddha saw the people, didn't he? He saw they were unawakened. He went to them. He saw them out there. They weren't in here. They were out there. Yeah, and he wanted to help them. And some of them didn't want to help or whatever. Mm-hmm. So where's the non-duality? The non-duality is between the grasper and the grasped. We see things in a manner that we want to see them, in a way. But when the grasping stops, what you saw is still there. It doesn't disappear. Mm. So I had that with Bhante as well. Yeah. Mm. And he goes, never says you're right. He just goes,
Sagramati, I think that is
okay. Yeah.
You've just added more. You've added more and given more. You know. So thank you very much for everything you've brought to us tonight.